Hello, welcome to School's Not Out. I'm sorry I can't be in studio with you today, but circumstances beyond our control. Welcome to School's Not Out, your daily classroom for CSEC and CAPE students. You can watch this lesson real time on television, Jamaica YouTube channel, or One Spot Media. We're also live on Music 99 and GoJamaica.com. If you have questions on today's subject, you can send them into Television Jamaica's Facebook page or Instagram at television_Jamaica. Today's lesson is CSEC Principles of Accounts, and I am Latoya Chambers Hogg, coming all the way from St. Anne. Today's topic is manufacturing accounts. Now, I do not want you to knit your brows. I do know that manufacturing accounts can be a very long workout. But I do promise you that this morning we're going to take it in small bites so that it can be easily digested. Before we start though, we're going to set some groundwork for the lesson. We will now establish our objectives. What is it that we hope to achieve? Students, at the end of this lesson, students should be able to define clearly the purpose of the manufacturing account. Students should be able to compare and contrast the type of cost incurred by a manufacturing entity. Also, at the end of this lesson, students should be able to outline 3 categories of stock that relate to a manufacturing entity. Additionally, students should also be able to draw up correctly the manufacturing account. Last but not least, students should be able to calculate accurately, not just calculate, but calculate accurately the total cost of production for a manufacturing entity. All right, so students, are you ready? Let's go. What is the purpose of the manufacturing account? Why do accountants need to do a manufacturing account? Now, the purpose of the manufacturing account is to calculate the business's total cost of goods completed. Again, to calculate the business's total cost of goods completed. Now, what type of business then would need to do a manufacturing entity if they're setting out to calculate total cost of production? Yes, you are correct, students. Entities or businesses that manufacture or produce their own goods. Let's look at some examples. An example of this would be Island Dairy, producing its ice cream, its juices, etc. And we can also think of Carib Cement. Good. And can you think of any other? Let me see. What comes to mind is Juicy Patties or bakers of patties. Right, Juicy Patties, Tasty Patties, Mothers, all you patty lovers, you can name them. All right, now remember that it's not only large entities like these businesses that would have need to do a manufacturing account. You can look in your own community and you will identify a little man or woman, as a business person who is making their own product, right? These, for example, a block maker. This block maker may have need to do a manufacturing account, all right? Now, we're moving on. We've established our objectives. We've also looked at the types of businesses that actually would use a manufacturing account. Now, if you can recall, the definition said, students, that the manufacturing account is to calculate the total cost of production. Total cost. It therefore would indicate to me that there are numerous costs that you set out to add up. Let's look at these type of costs that are incurred by a manufacturing entity. The type of cost incurred by a manufacturing entity would be prime cost. We also have production cost, as well as total cost. What is the prime cost? Let's look at these individually. The prime cost would comprise of the cost of our direct materials. And those are materials that can be easily traced to the item that is being produced. We also have direct labor. Now, the direct labor would be any expense such as wages that we pay to the individual who is directly involved in the manufacturing process and not just giving support service such as an administrator or a supervisor. And of course, we have other direct expenses such as royalties. Now, what is the production cost? The production cost would entail, students, what we just looked at before, the prime cost plus our factory overheads or indirect expenses, and of course, we would have our total cost. What is the total cost? The total cost would be equal to what we looked at before, prime cost, yes, plus our production cost, very good, and of course that would give us our total cost. So our total cost would be equal to our prime cost plus our production cost. Not bad, we're setting the foundation. I have a trivia for you. Are you ready for that trivia? Trivia number 1. The production cost for an entity is the prime cost plus works overhead expenses, A. B, direct labor plus direct materials plus direct expenses. C, administrative expenses plus selling expenses. Or D, none of the above. The answer is coming up. So, we've just looked at the type of cost. Now it's time for us to look at the types of stock involved in the manufacturing process. What I'm doing here, student, is extremely important because you'll be hearing these terms when we go into the account itself. So you need to understand as we establish the groundwork further. What are some costs that are involved in the manufacturing process? Some of these stock, or these stocks are, let's go, stock of raw materials. We need those. Those are our direct materials. We have stock of work in progress. Now, our stock of work in progress, as the name would indicate, would represent those raw materials that we've started to work on, but we haven't gotten a chance to complete them. They are still work in progress. They haven't reached a saleable stage yet. And then we have stock of finished goods. The stock of finished goods, however, is dealt with in the trading account of the manufacturer because that is what he actually sells. And today, we will not be looking at that, but possibly in subsequent classes. So, what are our stocks that are involved in the manufacturing process? 1, stock of raw materials. 2, stock of work in progress. And 3, stock of finished goods. Now, let's see if we can have a pictorial representation of this. If you're baking your patty, okay, you are going to need some ingredients. In this case, we're going to say raw materials, all right? I'm thinking of flour, whether white flour or wheat flour, whichever type of patty you like. Good? Now, the flour is a part of the raw material. Likewise, we may have some minced beef, the filler for the patty itself. All of those would be our raw materials. Then, in putting those together, before putting it in the oven, it will probably want to look like this. Yes, just right for the oven. Now, students, you can't eat that, That is just work in progress. You have to put that in the oven and then you will get something looking like this. Finished goods, patty itself, ready to bite into. Good. So therefore, our stock involved in the manufacturing process are stock of raw materials, stock of work in progress, and stock of finished goods. We're moving on. Beautiful. Now I have a trivia for you, trivia number 2. Work in progress is the A, sales less cost of goods sold, B, sales plus cost of goods sold, C, value of goods sold on hand, D, value of partly finished goods. Again, the answer is coming up. Now, we're about to go into the manufacturing account itself. But before I do so, I need you to get your pens and papers ready. Well, at least you should have already had them out, right? The mnemonic or the memory aid that I'm about to share with you is one to assist you in remembering the format of the manufacturing account or the items in the manufacturing account. If you can recall, when you were doing trading and profit and loss account, the trading account emphatically, in trying to calculate the cost of goods sold, your teacher taught you something like this: opening stock, add purchases, add carriage inwards, minus returns outwards. And that would give you your cost of goods available for sale, less closing stock, and that would give you your cost of goods sold. All right, now we're going to ride on that same principle with the manufacturing account in calculating first of the cost of raw material used or consumed for the manufacturer. To help you to remember this, I'm going to give you this. Remember now, write it down. Are you ready? Let's go. Only pet cats rest on neat, comfortable, cozy cushions. Again, only pet cats rest on neat, comfortable, cozy cushion. They're not true, students. Only a pet cat you would see really curled up on a comfortable, cozy cushion. What does this mean? Only is for opening stock. The O is for only, which represents our opening stock. P is for pet, and of course, it represents purchases. C is for cats, and the cats here, the C stands for carriage inwards. Remember, start writing, write it down. RO is for rest on, which stands for returns outwards. Then we have N, which is for neat, and the N stands for net purchases. We also have C, which stands for comfortable, and it represents our cost of raw materials available for use. Then we have C, which is for cozy, and the C for cozy here represents our closing stock. And our last C would stand for our cushions, and that represents our cost of raw materials consumed. So let's go through that again. It is simply only pet cats rest on neat, comfortable, cozy cushions. Good. Hold that. Don't let it go. We're going to link what we just said to the manufacturing account itself. Are you ready? Come on. Again, let's go into this even further. The format of the manufacturing account, I should point out to you students, is done vertically from top to bottom. So you won't see a distinguished debit side from a credit side. Everything will flow from top to bottom. All right? Good. Now, let's look at the items in the manufacturing account. The first set of items in the manufacturing account, or just before we get to the first set of items, let me tell you something. It is important for us to ensure that we label the account well. In my case, the name of my business is Bellyful Patties. Yes, sometimes I'm a lover of patties. So I'm using patties, when most of you love. So you put the name of the entity first, and then you put the label, manufacturing account, for the year ending December 31, 2018, or for whatever period you may get in the accounts exam. Now, the first set of items that we're going to look at is those concerning our raw materials. We're going to work out cost relating to our raw materials first. And we're going to follow the only pet cats rest on neat, comfortable, cozy cushions. Don't let it go. Application time. So here we are. We put the subheading raw materials. First item, opening stock. That's for only. In this case, we're going to use opening stock of raw materials figure of $50,000. Now, the opening stock is not sufficient because it's coming from previous period, a leftover flour and minced beef. And we need to produce more items. So the rationale is to go and buy some more. In purchasing the additional ingredients, will it cause us to have more or will it cause us to have less students? Less. So with that, what we will have to do is to add the purchases of raw materials to the opening stock. It makes sense. Add, showing an increasing effect. Now this purchases figure may need to be adjusted because we couldn't come into the business with the flour in our hand and the minced beef, etc. We may have had to pay somebody to carry it in. So therefore, we have to add our carriage inwards on raw materials. That is going to also increase the purchasing cost. So we add carriage inwards on raw materials. Now students, what we might recognize is that the flour may have been the wheat, but we had really wanted the white flour. Or the flour could have been old, so we have to return it to our supplier. Hence, we're going to have to less returns outwards. Remember, anything that we return in terms of stock to the supplier, we call it returns outwards. So this, we're going to label it returns outwards of raw material. That will give us our net purchases of raw materials. Now, we can only have a net, students, if we had a returns outwards figure. If there is no returns outwards in the question, do not panic. And secondly, do not label it net purchases. Just move on with life normally. Now, when we get our net purchases of raw materials, we're then going to add it to our opening stock of raw materials. Similar to trading account, not true. The principle remains the same. So when we add our cost of raw materials available to our net purchases of raw material, we're going to get our cost of raw material available for use. Then we're going to make patties and make patties and make patties like wow out of that cost of raw materials available for use. And in making the patties, we may have some raw material left over. Now we want to find out then, how much of the raw material did we use? Simply, we're going to less our closing stock of raw materials. So, less your closing stock of raw materials from your cost of raw materials available for use, and you will then get your cost of raw materials consumed. Not bad. So check the rhythm. Only pet, cats, rest on, neat, comfortable, cozy, cushions. You cannot let that go, students. It's a memory aid. It's a mnemonic. You must write it down. So we've established our cost of raw material consumed. We now need to work out our prime cost. Now, how do we get the prime cost? You're now going to add in your direct expenses or your direct cost. Now, your direct cost, many times in the question, you may see them say direct labor as a direct cost, or you may see direct expenses. Good? If you see direct labor, we're talking about factory worker wages, the person involved in the manufacturing process. Good. Now, direct labor here in this case is a total, our direct labor in this case is a total of, sorry, just a minute. Our direct labor in this case is a total of $3,000. We're going to add our direct labor or factory worker wages to our cost of raw materials used or consumed. When we do that, students, we will get our prime cost. So catch it again. We move from the cost of raw material used to adding our direct expenses, and that will give you your prime cost. So we've just worked with direct. Let's go now and work with the indirect. Now, our indirect expenses will be all our cost, yes, that we incur that relates to the factory, apart from factory worker wages, because the factory worker wages is already labeled direct. So factory rent, factory wages, factory depreciation, everything relating to factory, except factory worker wages will be your indirect expenses. Now, in this case, we have two indirect expenses, factory rent, as well as depreciation on factory equipment. We have $2,000 for factory rent, and we also have $4,000 for factory equipment. When we add those to our prime cost, we get a total of $65,000. That's a $59,000 plus a $2,000 plus a $4,000 gives us a total of $65,000. Now, students, listen. There's an exception to this rule, that of labeling that $65,000 total cost of production goods completed right away. If, and listen to me carefully, if the question has in stock of work in progress, you will have to pause a little before you label that item cost of goods completed. So what happens if there are stocks of work in progress on hand? If there's stock of work in progress on hand, we will simply have to do the following adjustment. We will simply do this. Listen. How do we do this? We will need to add opening stock of work in progress and then less closing stock of work in progress. Hold it right there. We will simply add opening stock of work in progress, then less closing stock of work in progress. Let's see what this would look like. Now, just before we had labeled the item cost of goods or cost of goods manufactured or cost of goods produced, we had a $65,000 there. Can you see that? Good. It simply means that if there's work in progress in the question, you would then add opening stock of work in progress right below that $65,000. And in this case, the work in progress for me, opening stock of work in progress, is $70,000. From it, I am then going to less closing stock of work in progress, and that amount is actually $4,000. And that will give me $3,000. Okay? I'd like to take the liberty of calling it my net stock of work in progress because I've less my opening from my closing. Students, when we do that calculation, when we say 7,000 minus 4,000, we get $3,000. And that will give us our total cost of production, which is a figure of $68,000. Not bad. So hold it. We're going to take a break. We soon come back.
CSEC and CAPE lessons live Mondays to Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon with weekly Schools Not Out tutorial sessions on Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Schools Not Out, live CSEC and CAPE lessons here on TVJ. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, along with TVJ, present Schools Not Out, CSEC and CAPE lessons live Mondays to Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon with weekly Schools Not Out tutorial sessions on Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Schools Not Out, live CSEC and CAPE lessons here on TVJ. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, along with TVJ, present Schools Not Out, CSEC and CAPE lessons live Mondays to Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon with weekly Schools Not Out tutorial sessions on Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Schools
Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Reduce your risk of viral.
live CSEC and CAPE lessons here on TVJ.
Welcome back to Schools Not Out, our daily classroom for CSEC and CAPE subjects. Today we're discussing manufacturing accounts, and I'm here all the way in St. Anne with you. Now, before we took a break, we learned how to calculate the total cost of production. We're now going to recap. So let's go quickly to our slides for recapping. Today we learned that our total cost of production of goods completed can be easily calculated. And there can be easily calculated by saying cost of raw materials consumed plus direct cost plus indirect cost plus opening stock of work in progress minus our closing stock of work in progress. Again, our cost of raw material consumed plus direct cost plus indirect cost plus opening stock of work in progress minus closing stock of work in progress will give us our total production cost of goods completed. Secondly, we learned that examples of our direct cost are factory worker wages as well as royalties. Examples of our indirect cost, students, are those that are related to the factory, except factory worker wages. Also, remember that we have three types of stock to consider when doing the manufacturing account. Stock of work in progress, stock of finished goods, stock of raw materials. Now let's answer our trivia questions. All my smarties. The first one. The production cost is the total of prime cost plus work overhead expenses, B, direct labor plus direct materials plus direct expenses, C, we're going to go back a little. Prime, the first question, trivia number one, our production cost is A, prime cost plus work overhead expenses, B, direct labor plus direct materials plus direct expenses, C, administrative expenses plus selling expenses, or none of the above. The answer to this question is A, prime cost plus work overhead expenses. Trivia number two, work in progress is sales less cost of goods sold, sales plus cost of goods sold, the value of finished goods on hand, or the value of partly finished goods. The answer to this question is the value of partly finished goods. Students, that's basically all for today, but please remember, even though this year's exam will focus on our SBA, you still need to know inside out the principles for each workout, because that's how the multiple choice for manufacturing account is set up, as well as for other accounts. So you can't SWOT. You have to know the do's and the don'ts and the whys. All right, it's important that you learn the principle. So that's all for today's CSEC. We hope you held on to some of the points we discussed. You can catch a repeat of today's lesson on JNN today at 5 p.m. and in the Schools Not Out highlights on Saturday between 1 and 4 p.m. It will also be on demand on One Spot Media. Until next time, I am your accounts teacher, Latoya Chambers Hogg. Remember, wash those hands.
The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, along with TVJ, present Schools Not Out, CSEC and CAPE lessons live Mondays to Fridays from 9 a.m. to 12 noon, with weekly Schools Not Out tutorial sessions on Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Schools Not Out, live CSEC and CAPE lessons here on TVJ.